Hi everyone. Thanks Chetan for organizing this online presentation series. And as Chetan has introduced, my name is Dee, and I did my MA in History of Design together with Chetan and a few friends here. So now I'm doing a PhD in Chinese Studies to continue with my MA thesis. So the topic of my PhD project, as you can see, it is the connoisseurs and the connoisseurship of Ming furniture in Peking from 1930 to 1950. So it's in Chinese, it's about Chinese art. And Peking was the name for modern-day Beijing during this period. And this is a particular period in the early 20th century which intertwined with the Second Sino-Japanese War, the Chinese Civil War, and the first year of People's Republic of China. And the next slide, please. So to connect this with this series of presentation that Chetan organized and with fellow RCA alumni here, I would like to explain a little bit about the origin of this project. This dates back to my MA thesis, which is about Ming chair. The thesis about Ming chair's origin, development, and circulation in history, as well as modern day reinterpretation. As you can see in this picture, this pretty much illustrates the gist of my thesis. So you have one authentic Ming chair in the front, which dates back to the Ming Dynasty in the 16th, 17th century, and a few different variations of Ming chairs, as well as modern Danish designers' interpretation of Ming chair. So in looking up the circulation, next slide please. In looking up the circulation of Ming chair in the 20th century for my MA thesis, I came across a paragraph in a book about Chinese furniture by the French art dealer Michel Berzely. This book is one of the very few monographs on Chinese furniture in France, and is usually overlooked by English scholars and general readers. So this is this paragraph put here. It goes, at the famous exhibition of Chinese art held at Burlington House in London in Great Britain in 1935 and 36, there was not a single piece of Huali furniture. Here, the Huali furniture means Ming furniture because Huali is the name of the material, the hardwood for the majority of Ming furniture. Yet at that time in China, especially in Peking, diplomats and foreign residents were in the process of discovering this furniture and making efforts to acquire the better specimens. Among the most enthusiastic collectors we can quote, and he went on to quote several figures, so many figures of different nationalities here. So this paragraph is quite revealing to me, and it depicts a picture that is not seen elsewhere in narratives about Chinese furniture or Chinese art in general in the Republican period. But due to the limited scope of my MA thesis, I did not investigate further until I decided to bring this topic again to continue with it for my PhD. Next slide, please. So inspired by this quote and by rereading monographs on Chinese furniture, I came up with this research question: how and why Ming furniture, a household object in northern China, became a sought-after artifact among international connoisseurs in the first half of the 20th century, and subsequently a major category of Chinese art. This question has not been addressed in existing literature on Ming furniture, which takes Ming furniture as merely as an art object, at most a given genre of art, rather than a changing cultural and social category that was created and negotiated by many more individuals and institutions in a particular period of time. To answer this question, we need to go back to the 1930s and 1940s in Peking to revisit those people who were there and the sites where the encounters with Ming furniture took place. Thus, my research project is a historical one, and yet it is not just a project about the Ming furniture per se, but an inquiry into the historical and cultural context in Republican China. Next slide, please. So the research will be mainly based on historical literary materials and archives, including Ming furniture connoisseurs' published and unpublished works, memoirs and diaries of these cultural figures active between the 1930 and 1950. The investigation into the historical context will be based on a combination of transnational and local history. At a transnational level, it is embedded in the context of changing international scenes across the US, Europe, China, and Japan in the 1930s and 40s, including the Great Depression, the rise of the Nazis in Germany, and Japanese imperialism. At a local level, it takes Ming furniture as a case study for the cultural history of Peking in the early 20th century. An object-based approach will not be the main method, mainly because the material of Ming furniture is quite difficult to trace back to the Republican period. However, it will be used in order to understand the domestic context for using Ming furniture in Chinese households and the trading of Ming furniture in the art market of Republican period. Next slide, please. So for this project, one special approach is particularly focused on is the idea of connoisseurship. So according to the glossary of the handbook, Histories Through Material Culture, connoisseur is an expert judge, usually in matters of art and culture, while connoisseurship is the practice of being an expert judge in matters of taste. Connoisseurship within art history scholarship refers to the practice of identifying artworks of individual artists through close analysis of the work and in-depth knowledge of their technique and a wider body of work. So basically, it implies that connoisseurship is an intellectual exercise. It is different from collecting in that sense. Like collecting is a mass of objects. While connoisseurship, you have to exercise your judgment and with knowledge of taste, etc. And also, as noted in the special issue of Journal of Art Historiography on connoisseurship, there is a need to situate its practice within the context of its social cultural conditions, which requires not only an investigation of the practical knowledge that informs the act of attribution, but also a consideration of the network in which the judgment takes place. So this quote summarizes the research approach that my project is going to take. Next slide, please. So since this is an interdisciplinary project on material culture, it is not easy to pinpoint exactly which field that my research is going to contribute. There are a few connected areas of study, namely historiography of Chinese art, Western interest in art and culture in Republican China, knowledge and or cultural production of Chinese art, as well as the idea of what is China, and a global trend of pursuing folk, national, and modern material culture in the early 20th century. I'm not going to details on these areas, but just to give you an idea that where to situate this research. Next slide, please. Since I have just started this project for a few months, still at the stage of literature review and examining existing publications, I have not gone into the real archives. However, some of the writings of these key connoisseurs are also my primary sources. So namely the German art historian Gustav Eiche and his Chinese domestic furniture. So Gustav Eiche came to China in 1923 to teach at a few Chinese universities. He was an active member of the expatriate community in Peking, in particular the Zhongde Xuehui, that's the Deutschland Institute, an institute sponsored by the Nazi Germany government, but managed to keep a very relaxed and liberal environment in Peking for both German and the Chinese intellectuals. Next slide, please. So the next figure is American writer George Cates. George Cates came to China in 1933 after the Great Depression that his family got broke, basically. He stayed in China until 1941 before the Pacific War broke out. He taught at Yanqing University where many foreign intellectuals gathered, and he published the book Chinese Household Furniture in 1948. Next slide, please. So the only figure I included here, the Chinese figure, is Wang Shixiang, who was born and raised and almost spent his entire life in Peking. Influenced by his family, he was in the antique art circle, but not so much in the expatriate circle. So these three figures are the most prominent figures that are usually featured in the standard narratives about Ming furniture, which culminated in Sarah Handler's book, Austere Luminosity of Chinese Classical Furniture, published in 2001. However, by carefully examining the writings of these figures, which I have done in the past few months, you will find that the standard narrative is very problematic. Next slide, please. The first problem is that the standard narrative in the discussion tends to focus narrowly on only a few renowned individuals, without looking into the context, role, and the complex interactions in the extended network of connoisseurs, art dealers, amateur collectors, scholars, photographers, diplomats, and craftsmen, etc. The second problem is that the standard narrative attributes the discovery of Ming furniture almost exclusive to Westerners and their tastes, neglecting their Chinese as well as other Asian counterparts, as if there was only the Western eye that discovered the Ming furniture. In fact, it could well be the opposite, for it was these Westerners' admiration and emulation of the lifestyle of a Chinese scholar that led them to get to know and appreciate Chinese furniture. In summary, the standard narrative goes that Ming furniture was discovered by a few Westerners with Western knowledge and without acknowledgement of their Chinese counterparts. Each of the three propositions of this narrative is very problematic, which has been challenged in a critical essay of my first year report. So next slide, please. In my first year essay, I argued that back in the 1930s and 1940s, the connoisseurship of Ming furniture was neither merely a Western interest, nor was it a Western invention. It was a collective effort of foreign and Chinese connoisseurs who complemented each other in terms of knowledge, social circles, and information of the art market. As I summarized here, mainly is because I want to shift the focus from the art historical narrative that focus only on a few great individuals to a network of people, as well as a focus on the Western discovery to a collective Sino-foreign interest. And of course, I want to point out the neglect of Chinese knowledge in this narrative here, and to focus on the agency of Chinese connoisseurs. Next slide, please. But I'll skip many details here because I know many of you are not very familiar with this topic, the Chinese art. There is one underlying theoretical concern growing out of this critical analysis of these writings, which I believe may resonate in studies elsewhere. That is Orientalism. I quote the prominent art historian Craig Clunas here, who eloquently demonstrates why many writings by Western sinologists on Chinese art are Orientalist. For example, they ignored the traditional Chinese connoisseurs' criteria, as if the Chinese were not capable of knowing their own art. In Edward Said's words, where the East cannot represent itself but must be revealed to itself by the Western expert, who has penetrated its essential and unchanging characteristics. This is particularly evident in the American writer George Cade's writings on China, that only he was appreciating and enjoying the last days of old Peking, of old China. And also the curriculums pointed out the problem of associating some certain characteristics of Chinese art to the Chinese race. Like, for example, the quote here, "For it is only in the present century that the real achievements of Chinese art has been revealed." So this position is very similar to that of many of these Ming furniture connoisseurship writings, which believed that they discovered Ming furniture, even if the Chinese had been using Ming furniture for centuries before Westerners came to realize it. So next slide, please. For future research, there are several areas that this current project will bring me into. which, so I'll briefly introduce these areas here that I haven't really developed into yet. The first one is a socio-economic analysis of the lives of international expatriates in Peking from 1930 to 1950, including but not limited to sinologists, writers, journalists, diplomats, art dealers, photographers, travelers, etc. Why they came to China and how they eventually left. So the second area is the social life of the new class of Chinese intellectuals in modern China, who grew up in traditional Chinese families, but was educated in Western-style schools. Some of them even studied abroad. To some extent, they still carried on the Chinese literary tradition, but were economically dependent on new forms of employment at modern institutions, such as universities, publishing houses, and occasionally political positions. The third area is the cosmopolitan sides of social and cultural interactions between foreigners and the Chinese for provoking new ideas, including the Deutschland Institute, the Society for the Study of Chinese Architecture, and the Yenqing University. The fourth area is a differentiated art and antique market in Republican Peking for international and local customers, both for personal as well as collecting purposes. For more valuable art objects like porcelain and bronze, as well as less expensive objects such as curios and Ming furniture. Ming furniture was not particularly expensive in Republican period. And the next area is the imagination of a classical Chinese life, especially as a dying tradition by both foreigners and the Chinese through living Ming furniture and other means of appreciating Chinese art, which is assumed to be part of the motivation behind this Ming furniture connoisseurship. So the last area is the connection between the rise of Ming furniture connoisseurship and the concurrent Ming-gay movement in Japan, in the context of Japanese imperialism and the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere project, as well as in light of this global trend of pursuing folk, national, and modern material culture. So in conclusion, these issues are not exhaustive and by no means mutually exclusive, but weave together through the multiple facets of Ming furniture connoisseurship. Together, they constitute a landscape of the context in which Ming furniture connoisseurship took place and flourished. And my project is not just about Ming furniture per se, but to examine the social and cultural context through the lens of Ming furniture. So that's my presentation for today. Thank you very much.